I bet you didn't hear anything I just said because I did not have the microphone on. I'm sorry about that. Well, let's start this over. That's the beauty of live feeds, isn't it? You have to get everything right or you get nothing right. And so the microphone wasn't on. And so I'll bet it was very hard to hear what I just explained. What I explained was we have changed the title to Devotional Rants, and that's because a subscriber has suggested that since we call what we do Devotional Rants, why don't we call the channel Devotional Rants? And it goes along with the evolution of the channel over the 7 months that we've been doing this. Began as worship. Once in-person worshiping began again, the purpose of the channel really changed to providing devotionals and trying to point out where Christians are missing the mark in serving Christ. And so what you have now is Devotional Rants. So let's get to the rant, and it comes from the book of Judges, chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. After Ehud died, the Israelites again did what the Lord said was wrong. So he let Jabin, a king of Canaan who ruled in the city of Hazor, defeat Sisera, who lived in Harosh Hagoyim. He was the commander of Jabin's army. Because he had 900 iron chariots and was very cruel to the people of Israel for 20 years, they cried to the Lord for help. A prophetess named Deborah, the wife of Lapidoth, was judge of Israel at that time. Deborah would sit under the palm tree of Deborah, which was between the cities of Ramah and Bethel in the mountains of Ephraim, and the people of Israel would come to her to settle their arguments. Deborah sent a message to Barak, son of Abinoam. Barak lived in the city of Kadesh, which is in the area of Naphtali. Deborah said to Barak, "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go and gather 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them to the Mount Tabor. I will make Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, and his chariots and his army meet you at the Kishon River. I will hand Sisera over to you." And then Barak said to Deborah, "I will go if you will go with me, but if you won't go with me, I won't go." "Of course I will go with you," Deborah answered, "but you will not get credit for the victory. The Lord will let a woman defeat Sisera." So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. You know, Deborah is one of those characters in the Bible that a lot of preachers won't preach about. Why? I don't know. I have my suspicions. I think one of the reasons that they don't preach about Deborah is because Deborah is a woman. And I think also they don't know how to classify her. She's not a soldier. She hasn't killed 10,000 enemies with a jawbone of an ass. But she follows the path of Samuel, a prophet and a judge. She was a prophet. We need to get back to exactly what judges did. Whether they were warriors or they were kings or they were women sitting under a tree, they gave the proclamations that God sent to his people. God was the ruler of Israel during the time of the judges. God saw himself as the one who ruled Israel, and the judges were simply his voice among the people. And so it didn't matter if it was a woman or a man. The judge was giving out the orders that God had sent to Israelites. And later, when you read the Bible, you find that the Israelites wanted to be like all the other people and have a king. And this is where they really got in trouble, because God says, well, when you have a king, that king isn't going to treat you well. And a lot of the Israeli kings weren't great kings. But that's for another rant, isn't it? So, a lot of preachers don't preach about Deborah, but I think that's also because they don't really know how to classify Deborah. She's not, like I said, a warrior. She's not a king, but she is a prophet. She was the one who was giving God's wishes to the Israelites. And I think Deborah was a beast of a judge. I mean, look at this little story. It's a small story in Judges. And by the way, Judges is the one book in the whole Bible that has the most interesting women characters, fully developed women characters in Judges. But that's a side note. Barak comes to Deborah. Deborah says that God wants him to go defeat Sisera. He says, yeah, I'm not going unless you go. And she doesn't hesitate. She goes, bam, I'm going. But you're not going to get the credit. Now, immediately in that story, you think, oh, wow, Deborah's going to get the credit because Deborah's there. And it is true that Deborah's presence, the judge of Israel, with them in the battle, gave those 10,000 Israelites hope for defeating Sisera. The problem is, though, it wasn't Deborah who was going to get the credit for doing away with Sisera. It was going to be a woman, but not Deborah. So let's look at the scripture that shows that what that woman is. Now Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, turn aside, my master, turn aside to me. Do not be afraid. And he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. He said to her, please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. So she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink, and then she covered him. He said to her, stand in the doorway of the tent, and it shall be, if anyone comes and inquires of you and says, is there anyone here, that you shall say no. But Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and seized a hammer in her hand and went secretly to him and drove the peg into his temple and went through into the ground, for he was sound asleep and exhausted. So he died. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said to him, come, and I will show you the man whom you are seeking. And he entered with her, and behold, Sisera was lying dead with the tent peg in his temple. Woo! So, the woman who gets credit for eliminating Sisera is Jael, Heber's wife. Now, if you've been watching this channel, you know that I like to look at the Bible as a story, God's story. And the analysis I apply is not just historical, but also literary. And so if you look at this story as a literary piece, what you see is the three main characters, well, four if you want to count Sisera. The three main characters, Deborah, Barak, Jael. And some critics confuse this with diminishing the role of Deborah as judge. I think we have to be careful about reading in what's not there in the text. There is no qualification to the fact that Deborah is a judge. The Bible doesn't say she was a minor judge. It doesn't say that she was a part-time judge. She was judging Israel at the time. She was God's oracle. She was the vessel through which God judged and gave orders to Israel. God was Israel's king. That's how God wanted it. God wanted to be the king of Israel. And when you see, and I think it's best explained in the book of Ezekiel, he lays out why he's angry with the Israelites, what they have done, which is basically create treaties with other countries for protection when God wanted to be their protection. And so you see God lifting his protection from the Israelites. When the Israelites feel secure, they start doing what they want, and then God lifts that protection and they suffer the consequences of their action. What happens is the Israelites get comfortable because God is protecting them from those consequences. So when they stray away from God, God lifts the protection and they suffer the consequences of the actions that they've been taking. In the story of Deborah, it is interesting because God has decided to once again protect Israel because they have learned their lesson. For 20 years they've been subjected to the rule of a foreign leader. And Barak gets this army together, but won't go unless the judge, the one all these people recognize as leader, goes with them. And her presence gives them great hope. And I just love it that Deborah's prophecy that a woman would get the credit comes in the form of Jael. Oh my gosh, I love Jael. She's resourceful. I picture her as some beautiful woman that Sisera thought was a pushover, would do anything he wanted, and little did he know she was powerful too. I think we do ourselves a disservice as well as women when we begin to ignore characters in the Bible just because they're not comfortable. And Deborah is not comfortable for a lot of people because she doesn't fit the mold of subservient woman. She fits that mold of leader. And it doesn't matter if she sat under a tree or she sat in a temple or an office. Just like it doesn't matter if today if a country's leader is a woman or a man. They have the authority. And Deborah had that authority. It's time for us to understand that whether you are a man or a woman, you have the authority to tell people about Jesus Christ. You know, this is for another rant, but I often have people come to me and say, you know, I just want to know what God's plan for me is. And it's easy. I tell them, God told you what he wants you to do. Read the end of Matthew. He wants you to go tell the story of Jesus. Tell Jesus' story. But tell it right. Tell about the love that Jesus has for everybody. Tell the story that Jesus didn't condemn people. That Jesus didn't judge people. Jesus loved people, and he wants them to love each other. Jesus' life was an example of love. This story of Deborah reflects this love of God. Deborah was not afraid to go to the battle. Deborah loved God. Deborah did what Deborah was supposed to do. Deborah told people about God. Our purpose is to tell people about God and to find a job or a profession or a life that makes us happy, as long as we are following Christ and telling people about Christ. We are doing our job. Well, that's enough of the rant today. I hope that you, this week, I pray that you will be healthy, that you will be happy, that your family will stay away from the coronavirus, that things will go well this week. And if you do run into times when maybe life isn't as nice to you, that you are able to lean on God, that you'll call on Christ and the Spirit to sustain you. And so until next week, God bless and have a great day.